And also, I want to mention that I listened to all three of these, Nicole, that you posted on YouTube.
Okay, good.
So I am encouraging everyone to go to the Paint Creek website on YouTube, and if you want to hear this again for some reason, you can, or if you missed it, we can you can hear it there later.
And
Uh,
if you ever can't find it, you can always just email me and I'll send you the link for it.
yeah. Okay, so here's the chopping block,
Huh?
right? And I'm emphasizing that we really have to be aggressive about this kind of cropping that I'm talking about. I think Trisha's was a really good example of that. And I just want to flip through. I don't have a lot, but I want to talk first of all about, I think you know what this is, but just in case, you cut out two right angles out of some kind of colored cardboard, mat board, and you put them together like you see on the right, and you move them around to crop your photo, or which I'll show you in a moment, a painting that you're working on. It isn't working too well, and you want to see if you can come up with a cropped version of it. And here's an example of someone who took their painting on the left and then cropped in closer on the guy that you see on the right. And also, whoever did this probably did it in Photoshop, because if you look at on the left version, the baseboard is at an angle, but when he cropped it and showed us the version on the right, the baseboard is a line that's parallel to the top and bottom of the picture plane.
Maybe he cropped it and rotated it like 1 degree.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, Charles, I like the crop, but that's an awful lot of space between him and the candle.
It is. It is kind of dramatic too. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that this is. I don't like the painting at all, if you want to know the truth, but it is an example of cropping. And I want to show you another good example of this. I forget the name of this artist, but she did this painting and she didn't really like it. And it just looked kind of bland and ordinary. Like often we don't know what to do at the corner of the painting, so we put like a tree stump or some rocks in it or something. And she recognized that that was rather amateurish. So basically, she didn't like the lower third of the painting, so she cropped it, the actual painting.
Wow.
And now it's very focused and energetic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the good painting was, in the trees, not in that murky, the kind of mushy, murky water below. Look at that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
They've gone from being by a river to being on a hill.
Yeah. So I want to just start looking at some, I think, good examples of effective cropping from the history of art. And Emmanuel, is this the painting you wanted to say something about?
Yes, this is it. I thought it's fantastic. Just the general shapes, the big spheres that are made out of the hills and their reflection in the water. You can see circles and cones, and if you follow Cézanne's lesson, that everything can be reduced to 2 or 3 geometric objects. If you take the shadow along with the the actual over the water shape, I think it's fantastic. It's very reducible, and I think it's overall excellent. And the positioning of the boat and the mast right there, I think it's very, very mathematical.
Yeah.
It quite struck me when I saw it.
Have you seen the painting?
Oh no, just before our meeting, I was curious about your list and I checked out the first painting on the list. So
all right, okay. Yeah, and this is an artist, I've heard of him. I don't really know much about him. It's called Meditation from 1913. And it's the cropping of the boat in particular, but also cropping of the landscape, how the hills seem to just nose their way into the painting. Very effective on all levels. But another good this is not.
Well, Charles, one thing about that one that I found fascinating is the figure that's leaning against that post. that must have been really difficult to figure out what shapes would go around her head
Mhm.
and how much of the water to show between her and the pole. I mean, that's something you could fool around with for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna send you Sigrid, or you or Betsy or both sent me the plein air article today.
Betsy sent that, and I did not put it on my plein air thing because I wasn't sure. Is it okay for us to mail that out? I don't know what it's from a magazine.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna send you the PDF I did of it, and you can send that.
Okay.
I'll do that tonight. All
Okay.
right, so let's move through these. Another boat painting by Caspar David Friedrich. You know what he famous painting he did, don't you?
No.
Come on. The German artist with the guy on top of the mountain. We're looking at his back, and he has the top hat on. All right.
No.
Same artist, and you know, as far as I knew, that was the only painting that guy ever did. That's all I had ever seen. But he did this one, and I think it's just a remarkable example of dramatic cropping, don't you?
Oh yeah.
So if we want to paint a nice day with a sailboat out on the lake, great. But let's try to think of inventive ways to do it. Now, here's what I thought. I just love this painting. I've seen it
Yeah.
many times. Valaton, Felix Valaton, the Swiss painter. This is from 1909. Doesn't it capture some kind of feeling or mood? Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Even
And
though it's pretty stark in some ways, but when you look at the background and the foreground, there's a lot of different colors in there. It's not just a flat surface.
Well, look at the cropping.
Yes.
Very dramatic. And look, even the man, his nose is kind of cropped off. Right at the railing. And like you were saying in the previous painting, Sigrid, the artist does think about these things. They don't really happen accidentally in a painting like this. So very dramatic cropping of this couple at the theater. Now, I found another theater example to show you, and I never would have guessed this if I hadn't read it, but it's Hopper.
Really?
Yeah. Oil on Board from 1903. Solitary figure in a theater. He did a lot of theater-based paintings. I thought this was Hopper at first, and I looked it up, and it was Valaton. But yeah, this is a black and white study by Hopper, and he did more than one. But again, it's zooming in and having the almost awkward cropping of the great big movie screen. I think it's a movie. What, 1903? I don't know what it was. But he zooms in a particular way that brings us into the picture.
The other thing he did is the main thing of this is the person, of course, but they're not in the typical location where you would put a person.
No, and we only see the back of the head. He tells us a little bit, like the person is reading something, but doesn't tell us that much.
Wow.
How's that for cropping?
High drama.
I never heard of this guy, Michael Taylor. It's called Hair Bun from 1976.
Oh.
And I thought that when I found this on the internet, I thought it was crooked, so I tried to straighten it out in Photoshop, and then I realized he painted it that way.
Oh.
But it's pretty effective, pretty dramatic. There's a great mystery to what the heck's going on here. It's a beautiful painting.
Yeah, what is she looking at?
Yeah.
Or what is she looking away from? You know, deliberately turning away. Either way.
Right. Well, it's interesting, the composition too, that she's looking off the screen or off the picture, kind of, almost.
Yeah. Yeah, he's breaking the rules.
Yes.
You know, you never do that in a painting. Well, as soon as you hear someone say that, do it.
Right. Exactly.
try it at least. So yeah, it's just the opposite of what you would expect, and it has a intrigue because of it. Now, a similar one, and this is somebody named German guy Ernst Oppler from, I don't even have a date, early on, late 1800s. But he crops everything out. He was in a room, obviously, but he decides to crop out the room and just show us the window frame and the view out the window. And I'm still waiting, I keep saying this, for someone to paint, look out our window and paint what you see out the window and
I'm
incorporate.
working on it.
Good. Who said that?
Me, Andra.
Andra. Okay. Good. I mean, it's not an uncommon thing in painting, but it's, you only have to have a small sense of adventure to try it. Andra has more than a small one, but okay, so it's a nice, a good, interesting painting for cropping. And then there's this, I thought this was just a wonderful painting called The Convalescent from 1906, Lillian Westcott Hale.
This is the second painting I've seen from about that era where they have a giant bed with a person in it.
Mm-hmm.
And by making the person smaller,
Mm-hmm.
it just reinforces the feeling that there's an illness going on. It's a bigger thing than just the person, and that they're kind of lost in that big space.
Mm-hmm.
It's a unique technique, and maybe it's a reflection of the times in which they lived. There was a lot of death.
Yeah. Yeah, but don't you think it's a dramatic composition?
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, yes.
Kind of an unorthodox approach, especially 1906. I just think I never saw this painting or heard of the artist, but she's obviously a really good painter. Look at that face.
Yeah. Foreshortening, but it still looks beautiful.
Yeah. I love this painting too. I don't know who the artist is, Dennis Perrin. But putting something in the foreground it's heavily cropped, the bed, foot of the bed, and the viewer is forced to look past it into the space of the painting. Pretty common device. It's called repoussage, but it just means you put something big in the foreground that we look past.
Well, it also establishes that this is a bedroom.
Yeah, it does that too, yeah.
Without, you could have a writing desk in a different room of the house.
Mm-hmm. And who is this? Oh, Dennis. He puts a painting on the wall, so we have a painting within a painting.
Oh,
But he doesn't give us any detail in that painting, really. We don't really know what the painting is of. But there's sort of a diagonal movement from the lower left corner diagonally to the upper right. You see that?
Yeah.
The alternation of the shapes and the light and dark. Okay. And another back view of a woman, Tanis Matsurev. It's a watercolor from 2014, so we're jumping ahead now. And the cropping here is not so much cropping of the subject as it is just a change in your point of view. He's looking down pretty high, probably higher than standing, and it just gives us a very alternative view of this subject.
And that's watercolor, Charles. Boy, I've got a long ways to go.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's very beautiful. 2014. And now here, I know you were waiting for this. I want to show you everyone's favorite artist here, okay? Richard Diebenkorn,
oh,
right? Everyone loves Diebenkorn that I've talked about. I just do want to remind you all that even though by this time, this is, I don't want to have a date for it, but it's his sketchbook. And by this time, he was probably a rich, famous artist out in California. But he continued to meet with his colleagues as whoever, they had a small group that met to draw the figure, I think every week, like we do. And it's the, Richard Diebenkorn was famous for the Ocean Park series, which were large abstract paintings. But he just thought that drawing, not just to be drawing, but looking at the world and responding to it with pen and ink. And this has a vitality and an energy that you just don't see in a lot of life drawing. It's just alive.
Yeah, I love sketches like this because you can tell that it's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And just there was a process here that makes it very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can, and it's just his sketchbook. He wasn't
Yes.
concerned about how it turned out.
Mm-mm.
It was an investigation.
So cool.
And I also want to mention again that I do go to the Friday night drawing, and I always, on my phone, I pull up a couple of artists I want to look at a couple times during the evening, Diebenkorn and others.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is again a woman that I had not heard of from Norway, Ida Lorentzen. She was born in 1951 in New York City, but I guess it was Norwegian. But anybody not like this, or anybody like it?
I don't know why, but it reminds me of Andrew Wyeth, but I can't even think of the picture, but he often had light playing in from a window.
Mm-hmm.
Although I can't imagine him painting with all that purple. He would be more greens and blues.
Mm-hmm. And again, cropping is part of it, but even more than that, it's cropping most of the room out so that you're focusing on the corner of it and the kind of relationship of shapes that you find when you do that kind of cropping. So it's not just, oh, I'm going to paint my room. I'm going to really look at this room that I'm in as an artist would look and find something in it, something that wasn't immediately evident.
The composition is really interesting too, just with all the lines and the vantage points.
Mm-hmm.
There's many of them throughout this piece of art.
Yeah. Yeah, when you study it, there's a lot going on, a lot of real consideration of how these parts sort of speak to each other.
Mm-hmm.
The composition.
It's very technical. Looks like a very technical drawing.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes your eye go around the picture and keep picking up different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the things, I'm sorry, back on that other one that I thought was interesting was the reflected light, the reflected colors. So below the window, there's that warm orangey tone from the floor is being reflected up there.
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
in the upper right corner, there's like, you can see the light from the window is bouncing up in that upper right corner. Unlike any other place in the room, there's that speckling of the lighter tones. That's so skillful.
Mm-hmm. And this is an artist I come across once in a while, Walter Sickert. He was an American painter, and I don't think I really have any bio on him right now, but I just, he doesn't tell you a whole lot about what's going on here, and because of that, there's a mood and a mystery. But he does the dramatic cropping with the stairway railing on the right.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of suggests that we're walking down maybe a flat, one of those brownstones in New York or Brooklyn, and into a little gateway or whatever it is. And there's some people back there. and it's the cropping. The cropping has a lot to do with the intrigue of the painting, more than the detail of the subject matter. Okay, this is another artist I was not familiar with, Hoberston. And I just think it's real, the way he cropped the buildings very dramatically, obviously, and also cropped the car halfway across the car at the bottom of the picture in order to create, it's almost like a U shape, and the most of the painting is this perfectly empty sky because of how he cropped it.
For some reason, this reminds me of one of those pictures that Trish did. Didn't she put a car and then she had her house? And I wonder if she did it again and she dramatically cropped it, what would happen?
Yeah, I remember that painting.
My dad would kill me if I cut off his car. He would roll over in his grave.
So maybe you should leave the car whole and crop the house
Crop
then?
the house, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But I enjoyed this painting the more I looked at it. So here is, I showed you this last week, remember?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Who is it?
Fairfield Porter.
All right. Ruth, you'd get an A if I was grading this. Remembering Fairfield Porter. It didn't.
I like this one.
Yeah, the dramatic cropping of the house. I remembered it when I was putting this together. And I think, Diane, I think you said that you liked Porter in class.
I do. I like the simplicity, but yet it's not, you know what I mean? It's yeah, simpler shapes, but yet, there's so much more to it.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm going to call it simplification. I'm going to call it some, I know what you mean, but there's actually a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Flowers it's the placement that I just can't get past that signature, but if I take that out, I love everything else about it.
It's interesting, Charles, is this has a sense of impressionism to it.
Oh, yeah.
But yet I heard you say that you're not a big fan.
Well, it's only because they were all great painters, those impressionists, like Monet and the rest of them. But
yes,
it has become a kind of coffee table book, those beautiful coffee table art books, and it's always an impressionist, it seems, and it kind of goes up to Sargent, and after that, normies, as I like to call them, don't like anything that happened after that.
I think impressionism is really kind of cool because it allows the viewer to interpret, and versus having everything just laid out.
Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I can make those yellow flowers into bumblebees if I want. You know what I mean? I are like a little swarm of, you know what I mean? I feel like if everything is too realistic, it leaves little room for interpretation and play, and just letting my imagination decide what the story is.
Yeah, it can. That's absolutely true. And it's important to remember that the Impressionists were very radical and avant-garde at their time. It's just a little bit ironic how we regard them now. But here we have a young budding artist here joining us. Hi. Forgot your name. Manuel's daughter.
Yeah, Isabella.
Isabella.
Let me intervene on your impressionist talk. I think a good parallel would be Vivaldi in music. When I was a kid, Vivaldi was tremendously popular, and the seasons were everywhere. When you thought about classical music, it was Vivaldi every time. And I had the same impression as you know, about Vivaldi as you do about Impressionists, and because he was everywhere. It's just the default position of, you know, when you think about painting, you think about an Impressionist painting nowadays. So I understand your view, yeah. But again, Vivaldi is a tremendous, fantastic composer.
Yeah.
You know, just as the Impressionists.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Okay, now I don't have too many more, but this is this guy. I wish Phil could come to these, because Phil had a book on this painter from Pittsburgh, Donahue, and I like how he cropped the house quite a bit on the left, bringing it forward at us, and going back. Then takes us back into the space, and we discover that red building back in the shadow. Very
Mhm.
thoughtfully composed. And it's a beautiful painting. And this is the guy who's teaching the plein air workshop down in Pennsylvania, plein air. The plein air workshop at Falling Water,
Okay.
which is a 6-hour drive, but you should consider it. Okay, just another one that again, I fell in love with it, Corot. I'd never really seen it before, but Corot was just, like Monet said, the only master here is Corot. Corot is our only master, Monet said. And look at the cropping here. He pushes this mountain, whatever it is, right to the top of the painting, and most of the painting is just this kind of roundish sand. And that's so daring and effective for me. I want to look at it. Yeah, I imagine just about everyone here has climbed the dunes at Lake Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
Made me think of, I was thinking of making the mistake of walking down that one big dune down to the lake, and then you can't get up and you're looking back up, thinking, how am I going to ever walk back up this dune?
Did you walk back up?
No, I didn't go down.
I
I saw a
thought
lot of people struggling to get back up, and so I didn't go down.
But that's what this makes me think of. And here's a similar one. Redon, Odilon Redon. I've been showing you Redon, the great pastel painter. I don't know if I have a year for this. I don't, but it would have been the late 1800s. And again, he just puts the stuff of the painting is right at the very top, right? And the unimportant stuff takes up most of the painting. That's, in my mind, that's cropping. And it's dramatic, and it creates an intrigue in the painting. Does anyone not see that?
Yeah,
Well,
I think, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, just my initial thought with this is I view the bottom section that is kind of some muted colors and maybe less interesting, like Charles suggested, as that negative space that draws your eye up to where the greatest contrast is, which I think is so effective, because that's exactly, it appears, what the artist wanted us to see. Because even the line diagonally coming from the right pointing toward the center there, he or she tells us that's where they want us to look, which I think is very effective.
Yeah, it does that, and it does it in a way that still is somewhat, it's kind of avant-garde for the time to think about landscape that way. I still think I still like the Corot a little bit better. He didn't even bother with color, you know. But it's a tie. I'll say it's a tie between them.
Well, I like the green because it's calming, but there's a whole lot more to it than you think.
Yeah.
Oh, the layers. Oh, yes. Beautiful.
And here's another one. I follow this artist on Instagram, Katja Lang. It's a watercolor. again, big dramatic spaces that are arrived at through an approach to cropping. How you're going to frame your subject matter.
That definitely gives the feeling of big sky.
Yeah. And there's light and I think there's a power in understatement in art and in the holding back. It's almost like a psychological thing. I don't know if this is a man or woman, but and I think the person's German, but they don't like not giving us the pleasure of color. And that keeps my interest in a certain way.
Well, it definitely makes it very moody. Like that looks like potentially like a big angry sky.
Yeah. Okay, here is a very beautiful watercolor. I think any of us would be happy to do this out when we're out there. And you know, I paint down there by that pond all the time. And I see this all the time, like the weeds. I keep thinking that these little branches and weeds are blocking my view. Well, this artist, David Parfit, incorporated them. He cropped it in such a way that they were incorporated as part of the composition. They create this window where we could then look across the water and the field to the barn. I knew you'd like this one. I like it. And this is a friend of mine, Susan Castle. She is a really good painter, but she's traveling around Venice right now and taking these wonderful photographs. You can follow her on Instagram. The Instagram handle is Mythico, MYTHICO. And cropping the sidewalk there that takes you up. I just really like the daringness of those poles coming out of the water. And then the misty buildings across the canal. Susan Castle is her real name, and she wrote one of the essays for that catalog that we did for my show in Mount Pleasant. She is a professional art writer.
Wow.
And worked at the Guggenheim for a while.
Well, I'm glad she's there now because they're saying that they're having terrible crowds in Venice. And now they're starting to charge people to even walk on the sidewalk because they're trying to cut back on the crowds. So she's caught a very nice moment there.
The color of the water is amazing.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Beautiful.
For Venice, yeah.
Okay, this is I think this artist is really cool, really interesting. Henry Taylor. He's one of the so-called, they can't decide what to call these people that are basically self-taught artists. We used to call them different things, but I like his work, and it's just and he's unschooled, as you might say, and he cropped a tree trunk. We all love to paint trees, but how many of us would just crop it so that all we see is the brown tree trunk?
Well, I wish that he would see that muted picture with that muted green that we looked at and give that a try. This green is so bright.
Yeah, it's part of this
The effective ones, yeah.
outsider, pardon me?
It's the effect that probably that he wants it. I'm not sure, but
Well,
it really pops out there. I mean, it makes you either you like it or you don't, right?
Okay.
Stares at you.
Okay, just a couple more here. I know you'll love this one, but it is a good example of how we can take a rather cliched subject matter, a vase of flowers on a tabletop, and do something kind of fresh with it, like point of view. Looking down on it, the perspective is kind of wonky, but we don't really care. Like Matisse, it has a real Matisse feel. I think this is beautiful. And here's Matisse. And the cropping here is, what's he cropping? That's so daring.
Hmm.
The building's on the left for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I love the painting, and I wanted a justification for putting it in tonight. So that I recognized, yeah, he's cropping the barb house silo down there. Great painting. And finally, I never saw this painting before, but I swear I think I've seen it all, but this is now my favorite painting of all time.
Ooh.
It is a watercolor by Whistler. And it's filling up, it's too big. I should have made it smaller, but it's a watercolor called Nocturne, Black and Red, Back Canal, Holland. So he's in Holland painting the canals, and he just really gets a mood and a feeling by crowding the picture with the buildings and the canal. And he still sneaks a couple little people down there in the corner.
It looks like pastel to me.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It does, but it's watercolor. And he probably was out there at that time. It was getting dark doing it. And thank you.
Thank you, George.
I like the
Thank
chopping
you.
block analogy for what we're talking about.
Charles?